She has been appointed to the California Task Force on Family Caregiving to examine issues relative to challenges faced by family caregivers and opportunities to improve caregiver support, review current policies, and to make policy recommendations for new legislation. She has over 30 years of experience working with families in the greater Los Angeles community. Please help me welcome Dr. Donna Benton.
Well, today I was asked to talk about the sandwich generation, and my PowerPoints, they're clues to one of the answers for one of the questions. And hopefully, if you pay attention, somebody will guess the answer. So, is there a prize? I heard that. Yes, of course. And the prize is knowledge. Yeah, I know. I work for a not-for-profit. I have no money. Just can't give out prizes like I used to. If it was Halloween, I usually have Halloween candy, but we've missed that time frame. Yeah, I know. They have candy out there, but everybody gets that, so I can't really use it as a real prize. I'll give you a nice smile, and you'll feel good. So, all right. So, and I'm nowhere near my computer, so thank you. What's your name? Oscar? Scott. Scott is my new helper. He's going to be enlisted, and every time I say next slide, he's going to push a button. Next slide. So, first, let me just tell you a little bit about my organization. I'm from the University of Southern California, which is a college, but within that college, we are housing within the Leonard Davis School of Gerontology. We have a grant for caregiver services that we've been doing for over 40 years now. The Leonard Davis School has a commitment to work not only in teaching students about the aging process, but also our mission is to help families and communities really master challenges around family caregiving, and which are any of these dementia things that are going on with families. And we serve all of LA County, but our program is also serves as a model for what's been being done at the federal level for family caregivers. So that's kind of the history of a not-for-profit residing inside of a university. So we teach a lot of the students come through as interns, and we have interns from the medical side and social work and psychology and gerontology, obviously, because we're a school of gerontology. So we're all working together to provide information and resources and direct support for family caregivers in the Los Angeles area, which you guys are part of the Los Angeles area. Next slide. So one of the things, I think the reason that I like doing these kind of talks is because, as this quote says, when we talk about what matters to us, we discover things about our own self, things that we didn't really know affected us. And for the most part, when I talk about caregiving, most people say, "Oh, well, that's not me." That, they don't even know what's a caregiver? That's somebody you pay. But that isn't really what caregiving is, because next slide. Most of the care that's done in the United States is provided by family. So there's a general myth that we don't care for our elders, but actually 90%, anywhere from 80 to 90%, depending on where you look at the national statistics, all of long-term care for older adults is provided by family and friends and the community. So, but most people, they don't identify as family caregivers. What do we usually say we are? The majority of people who are caring, and you can see it's a big number, 43.5 million caregivers have been caring for somebody in the last 12 months. That's a lot of caregivers in the U.S. that are there. It is equal to $470 billion in economic value in the U.S. Now, do you think that's more or less than what we spend on Medicaid and Medicare?
More.
It is significantly more, almost twice as much. So if family caregivers, if we didn't care for our families, our economic engine in the U.S. would collapse. So we don't have any alternative long-term care at this point for us. So, and most of the time we're caring for maybe a parent, but we also could be caring now for a grandparent. And next slide, we have different caregiving looks now. So here, just in California, about 10% of the population are family caregivers. So we have a large population, and they're usually caring for a relative. But at the same time, they're also caring for a child who's 20, we're defining children now 21 and under. So people are really pressed. You're caring for maybe a parent or a grandparent because people are living longer, and you're still supporting a child on the other end. Next slide. So, there's a lot of diversity. Sometimes people say, well, that's only done in African American cultures, or only in Chinese cultures do they do caregiving. Every culture does caregiving. Most people are not putting their older relatives out on a float. You know, they say, oh yeah, they just kind of leave them out there alone. So that's not really happening. But if you want to look at the national profile, not surprisingly, most family caregivers are women. And depending on how the survey's done, you get anywhere from 60% is probably the lowest I've seen about how many women are caregiving. Usually it's more like 75, and that means that you can have anywhere from 40% caregivers are men. So sometimes we forget that it's not just, it is primarily women, but the profile has changed and we have a lot of men. And it's across all ethnic groups. 13%, 6% of the population are African American, 13 are African American, 6% are Asian Pacific Islanders. And these are usually just on the national profile, how many people say they're caregivers. Now some of these are lower in other communities, in the ethnic communities, because people don't identify as caregivers. Next slide. What do people really think of this? When you say caregiver, most people will say, well, that's not me, and what they'll say is, no, I'm just caring for my mom. So I'm not a caregiver, I'm a daughter, I'm a son, I'm an in-law, I'm a daughter-in-law, that's my auntie, that's my neighbor, that's my friend. You don't think of the word caregiver. So sometimes this makes it very difficult to find out who exactly is caregiving, who's doing the job of caregiving. And just, you know, I'm in a school, so I give a lot of statistics before I get to the real fun stuff. But in general, I said we already know it's a female, but the age, many times people think, oh, well, you work in a school of gerontology, so you're only talking about older people. But the average age of a caregiver is 49. That's not considered an older adult. This is usually a 49-year-old female caring for an older adult who might be 69 years or older. So caregiving goes across many generations. And it takes a lot of time. The average is about 4 years that a person will be giving care. And there's one quote that probably for the younger generation right now, they'll spend more years in doing adult caregiving than they ever will in child caregiving. So it's really a big shift in how long we will be doing caregiving in our lives for each generation. And it's usually quite a lot of time. On average, it's almost 24 hours. So that's like another half-time job on top of people that are already working when you're working full-time. Next slide. I don't read everything on a slide, so hope you can kind of just look at it as I talk. So when we talk about generations, you know, there are different names for different generations. So sometimes you might hear of the Gen X generation. So that's people that are born between 1965 and 80. So if you're born in that, you might be a Gen Xer. So you think, okay, so you're Gen X, you usually might have a parent who's over 65, and you can have a financially dependent child at the same time. When they looked at this, when they talked to this generation, 15% of adults age 40 to 59 were actually providing financial support for their parent or somebody over 65 while raising their child, and 47% said that there's a chance that at some point in their lives, everybody will be responsible for an older adult or another elderly family member. So sometimes we don't even think that this is going to be a part of our life, but really almost half of the time you're going to do some kind of family caregiving. Next slide. The other thing besides that is that we have our different generations. So that was, I said that was kind of your Gen Xers, but you can look also at baby boomers and how that population is growing. So in 2005, you had fewer, because of the age, they were not as many caregivers that were of Gen X. But now if you look at 2012, you can see that the Gen Xers are actually, more of them are now going to be family caregivers because they're moving into caregiving both for their parent and the younger parent. And the boomers are moving a little out of being caregivers because they're actually becoming the older adults now. So as we move through generations, each generation, it continues on with caregiving. Next slide. So that we have about, and what are the caregivers doing? 4 in 10 say that they're just providing emotional support, not only for their children, but for their parent. And emotional, that takes energy. Next slide. And 1 in 7 people are working while they're doing caregiving and providing some kind of financial support on both ends. So you're being pressed financially for children and for your adult parent. The other thing that happens with caregivers, besides the rewards, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but about 46%, some numbers as high as 50%, are considered clinically depressed. So caregiving can take a psychological toll on you and also a physical toll. They have higher levels of depressive symptoms and also mental health issues compared to somebody who's never done any kind of caregiving. So there is certainly things that you need to know, and about 70% of family caregivers said that at some point their caregiving had actually caused them some kind of physical health change. Next slide. So people are squeezed. You're squeezed from the income level, from generations, and interestingly enough, the higher income, the more people feel squeezed because they might be having children later, and so they may be contributing more on both ends for their family members. So it comes down to stress. And if you're kind of in of these generations, and I think I've covered everybody in this room as far as generations, you probably might be in that, and maybe you're here because you feel like you're depressed. You're part of that stress generation, and you're getting some kind of stress. But what is stress? Stress is kind of about 20% of what happens to us and 80% of what we respond to. So our stress and how we physically see stress has, it's not just the fact that we're caregivers, but it's also how we perceive and how we handle the caregiving situation. So, it's that old glass, if it's half full or is it half empty? Can we find solutions, or are we finding more problems? And it's also influenced by other factors, next slide, which have a lot to do with, do we feel there's support for us? Is that available? Is it voluntary or not voluntary, how we're doing caregiving? Is it something like it was more tag, you're it? Or did you say, oh, this is something I want to take on? Is it the relationship? What was your relationship like with the person you're caring for? We've all have family and family relationships over years, and they're not always the nicest, but part of our responsibility as an adult child might be that in our culture, no matter what our relationship was like with our parent, if something happens, we're going to be the ones taking care of them. But while you're taking care, that relationship could cause some stress for you as you're caring for your relative. So how you cope with that and what you do can also add to the stress for it as a caregiver. So one of the things is we have to learn how can we manage stress. Now, stress is not something that is an all or nothing. You do need stress in your life, right? Anybody disagree? So there's 2 types of stress. There's good stress and there's bad stress. Can somebody give me an example of good stress? Oh, that's exciting. Yeah? Exciting, stressful, yes. What else? Tell me some other good stress. Deadlines. Sometimes it helps motivate you. Other good stress.
Physical stress.
Pardon?
Extra strong, heavy workout.
heavy workout. So physical, so you're thinking kind of the physical stress. If you win the lottery, that would be stressful. It would be a good stress, but it can be very stressful. Planning weddings and parties and get-togethers, all of those are kind of good stresses. And then I don't usually ask what are bad stress, because then everybody has it. You see, it's a lot harder to think of the good stuff. So we have to recognize stress, but when we have more of the stress is what it is, we have to kind of divide it into, is this a good stressor, bad stress, is it motivating, or is it draining for us? You have to look at some of the warning signs. One of the things that happens for us when we're caregiving is that we forget to look for early warning signs of, like, maybe we're a little more irritable, or maybe you're more short-tempered, or you start having physical aches and pains. But we don't pay attention to that because we just think that that's just normal for us. But usually our body gives us pre-signals before our stress level gets too high, and you really have to intervene very deeply, and you don't want it to turn into depression or an anxiety or a health problem. So the first thing that in order to reduce our own personal stress is you have to recognize what's stressful for you. Are you noticing you're forgetful, or you have a physical ache and pain, or something in your neck? What's causing the stress? And then maybe understanding, is this something that I can actually change? So one of the things I hear a lot from families is, I wish my sister would help me more. And then sometimes I'll say, well, how long has it been since your sister helped you? Oh, about 8 years. I think you're going to have to accept she's not going to help you. At some point, we have to say we can't change others. We can only change ourselves. So while we may want people to help us or some other situation to change, sometimes we have to go into the serenity prayer of God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So it's hard to let go sometimes, but if the anger is just kind of eating you up, that's not helping you overall. As somebody said, if you are angry with sometimes it's more like you're drinking the poison and expecting the other person to die. And that's not what we want to happen to us anymore. So we want to be able to take action and do things that are stress reducing for you as a person. And each person that's like, it's very individualized. So because stress is individualized, for some people, stress might be more, you can feel it in your body more. And so if you're feeling it in your body, you might be the type that you need to do workouts so that you can relieve the tension in your body. For others, it may be mental, so that you may need to do relaxing exercise or meditation so that you can quiet your mind. Or it could be a combination of both. But you have to be able to assess how do you see your stress, and then what you choose to do to help reduce it, not eliminate, but reduce it, should match where your stress level is. So the next thing for helping stress is that it's helpful to maybe also set a goal for yourself on how you want to go about making your change. So, so you can put them all up at the same time, keep going till I get all the little dots up there. So, for example, somebody may say, oh, I want to take a break from caregiving. Now that's a big goal. But you can break it down into smaller ways of handling it. Is what does a break mean? Oh, well, even if I got to go out on a walk for an hour uninterrupted, that would be a break from caregiving. So then you can have a goal of, can I find somebody to come in and watch my relative or watch my kid for an hour, and I know they're safe, and I'm just going to take a walk and not think about my responsibilities for an hour. That's a step toward the larger goal of reducing stress. So maybe you start with once a week, and then maybe you can move it to twice a week that you get to take that hour break. Where before you may not have been taking any break at all, but you have to make a contract with yourself so that you can feel better and engage in activities that make you feel better. Or you want to get healthier, so you can say, my first step might just have a physical first, and then come up with a plan of action on how I'm gonna make myself feel better. So this is kind of, and these are things you actually write down when you're trying to do stress reduction. You have to write, be very specific of your goal and the steps that you're gonna take. So you make an appointment, then you take a half-hour break during the week, and you make your goals achievable. A half hour doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're going from 0, you don't wanna say, I'm gonna take 4 hours of exercise when you've done none. You have to make it reasonable, because you'll feel good if you say, I'm gonna do a half hour, and you actually accomplish it. And then you add another 15 minutes. So you do things that you want to do and that you can accomplish. And then you can see it moves up to 3 times a week for 10 minutes. They broke it down even smaller, but you just kind of get to your goal slowly and work your way into a healthier lifestyle. Number 3, next slide. I didn't make these. They weren't supposed to take so long. Keep going. There, just keep going till everything's on there. So we have to look for solutions. Now, sometimes you say, oh, well, that's the easy part. Actually, solutions sometimes it becomes harder to find a solution because you might be thinking this way. And because you've always had this kind of thinking, you don't see that there might be answers on each side. So part of solution is to be able to throw every idea up there without editing, without saying whether it's going to work or not. Have somebody help you come up with some solutions. So when you're doing solutions, you have to identify the problem and keep an open mind about possible solutions before you take them off the table. That's generally one of the hardest steps, is keeping that open mind to the solution. Because we tend to hear this and go, well, that's not going to work because of this. We don't start there. We start with, let's put everything on the table. Then you take one and try it. If it doesn't work, then you move to the next one and the next one, so that you give yourself more options than your narrow vision. And it's also good to be able to maybe go to a support group, or talk to a social worker, or somebody who's more neutral than sometimes your family members, to get some of these solutions, to reach out to social service agencies or other partnerships, like with the partnerships, and talk to other families or talk to other caregivers, so that you get different ideas, because you don't know what might work for you because you haven't tried it yet. Keep going. Keep going. So we have our plan of action, and another thing that you can do for your action plan is you begin by educating yourself on what is the issue. So if you're caregiving for someone with dementia, but you say, well, what is dementia? Is dementia the same thing as Alzheimer's? Okay, it isn't. What is it?
Dementia? So if you have a spoon, they still know that that's a spoon, whereas Alzheimer's, they might not know the name of that spoon.
Okay, so you're thinking about the quality of the response of the person. And that's actually good, but that's not exactly the right answer. So you want to try it?
I think dementia can be caused by there are different causes for it. You have to actually fine tune and get the specific reason for the diagnosis. And Alzheimer's is one type of dementia.
Exactly. So I'm not sure if everyone heard her, but if you think of dementia as that umbrella word, so if I say I have a car, you might think, okay, then do you know what kind of car I drive? No. But if I say the word car, what do you think about? You know, it has wheels. Now it could be gas, it could be electric, it could be a combination. You know, it has steering column, all of that. So you have a general idea. That's what the word dementia is. So part of education is, if someone tells you your relative has dementia, your next question really has to be, what kind? Because sometimes you don't, because unless we know what type of dementia, Alzheimer's being one type, but there's also ALS and Parkinson's and stroke-related dementia and traumatic brain injuries. All of these cause different dementias, and each one has a different treatment and outcome and how you can intervene, and they need different medications. So if you walk away with nothing else today from what I'm saying, remember that if you're looking at a diagnosis and your physician or whoever has just told you that your relative has dementia, please go back and try to find out what kind. Because you get a different prognosis and you can treat it differently. But overall, what they're telling you is it's something that is not reversible. It is going to have a prognosis of getting worse, but it doesn't tell you, like if it's a stroke, it may have a different trajectory of how, the level of how it's going to get worse compared to Alzheimer's, which might be steadier. And kind of the symptoms and things that'll happen will be different. So it's always good to get a firm understanding, so educate yourself. And then you can find the right resources, the right fuel for the car. So then you know which kind of organizations to reach out to, caregiving organizations, or I should be working with ALS and not the Alzheimer's Association, or I should be working with Parkinson's people or stroke people. You can join a support group, and within those support groups, you also get to meet more people that are in similar situations, but you can learn from them too. You can also learn, if you want, part of your action plan can have a family meeting. One of the things that sometimes is very helpful is getting everybody on the same page by being in the same room at the same time. But do not do this during a holiday. It's just a bad idea. Everybody say, well, it's convenient, you know? It's a holiday, it's a wedding, let's just all talk about what's going on with mom. No, please, don't do this during the convenient times. This has to be something separate, neutral, and you can actually ask for somebody to come in and help mediate if you don't have a general family meeting. And that's a whole different lecture, so I'm not going to go into how to hold a family meeting, but I do have a fact sheet on that if you want that information. That way, all of this is really helping you build your support system, and then we're also going to talk about taking a break for yourself. So number 4, I think there's more. Learning to communicate is very important, and there are courses and classes that you can take, like we have powerful tools for caregivers that teach you the best way and how to do iMessages and how to talk to family members, how to talk to physicians, all of these kind of ways of how to be clear and specific and direct and be a good listener, and how to be assertive but not the same as aggressive. So learning specific communication techniques can actually help with reducing stress for you as a caregiver. The other thing, of course, tool number 5 is asking for and accepting help. This can be difficult because, keep going, there's another side on here, just keep going till, I'll tell you when to stop. Great. All right, so many times people are reluctant to ask for help because you feel like, well, I know the person best, my relatives doesn't want me to get somebody else in the house, or they don't like other people, no one's going to do it as well as I do, all of which can be true statements, but still not the best thing for you as a caregiver or for the person you're caring for. Because if you are doing it all, at some point you're going to exhaust yourself. It's like when you're on a plane, they say, if in a case of an emergency, you put your mask on first before you even put it on the person, your child or the person with you. And the reason is that because otherwise you can pass out and not be able to help the person. So we really have to be able to help ourselves in the long run, so we can be there in the long run, and we don't have our worst case scenarios. Who's going to care for my relative if I'm not there? So that's why you have to take care of yourself. So you have to really understand about asking for help and accepting help from people. Sometimes one of the things that makes it difficult for family members or friends or agencies to help you is that you may not be specific in what you ask for. And that's sometimes hard, because if somebody comes and says, oh, what do you need? I need everything. I'm tired. I need everything. So I always say the best way to begin to be specific about what you need is make a I wish list. So if you're currently caring for someone, or you're thinking about caring for somebody, anytime you say to yourself, I wish I could have somebody, we all get that, oh, but I wish this, like I wish somebody could make dinner tonight. I wish I didn't have to go to the grocery store. I wish somebody else could go shopping here or go pick up the medicine. You begin to write down every time you think to yourself, I wish I had help for this. And you just write down the list. Just have it there. One day, somebody will say, let me know of anything I can do. You go pull out the list and say, take your pick. Right? So that's what, but you have to have that in advance because when you're stressed, you can't think of all those things. So you start, keep a little notepad, make your I wish list. But that helps you be specific, and when you let people help you, it's a gift to them. I mean, how many times have we learned over and over that the joy of giving and being able to help is rewarding? So you want to let people really do that. People generally are being sincere when they say, let me know what I can do to help. And sometimes they stop asking because you are giving them specifics. You aren't saying, please just, can you make three lunches for me that I can put in the refrigerator? And they go, oh, I can do that. But if you just say, I'm hungry, you know, like if I go with my husband and he says, I want to go to dinner, and then I say, I'm hungry, and he goes, what do you want? And I'm like, I don't know. It just turns into a mess. So keep a list. Have all that ready. Okay, so, and remember that sometimes people are going to be hesitant. They don't want to do the wrong thing. Even that relative who maybe you've asked for the last 8 years to help you, instead of just come over and look at mom, maybe you have to find out what can they do that's comfortable for them. So they may not be able, because it may hurt their heart too much to see mom in whatever state mom is in, or dad. But if you say, well, can you look over the Medicare bills and make sure that everything is jiving? Or can you make all of the appointments? They might be able to do that because they don't have to see mom, but that is a task that you aren't having to do anymore. So kind of understand that the hesitancy and referral, don't take it too personal and try to work through that. It's difficult, but you can give it a try. That'll help you get through this. The other thing is, tool 6 is learning to talk to physicians. Just keep going, I'll let you break. Sometimes being prepared in advance with questions, again, it's pretty much like the I wish list, because the physician, they have what, 8 minutes, 10 minutes with you. So if you come in with lists and questions that you've noticed, you've observed something for the last 30 days, and now here's your 10 minutes with the physician, if you write it down and go in, then you know that you're going to get your questions answered, and actually the physicians really do like it. And they don't like when people come in and self-diagnose. I know that. But that's not what you're going in with. You're going in with information that can help them make a better assessment and a better understanding of what's going on. So you want to go in with what you think are important problems and concerns that they're never going to see in the house. Because when my grandmother, no, I don't care how sick my grandmother was, when we went to the doctor, she was dressed beautifully, and she would get into the doctor's office, and when the doctor says, how are you doing? She goes, wonderful. Now, at home, she's really sick, she can barely walk, she's like, can you cook? Absolutely, I can cook. My grandmother hadn't cooked in 6 years. I can cook, I can clean, I can do, of course, I'm a strong, and if he listened to her, she didn't need anything. So, because for the physician, in his role, in her culture and in her background, you always came in and you really didn't complain, and you had to look nice, and you agreed, and you were agreeable. And no matter what medicine he wanted to put her on, she would say yes, including penicillin that she was allergic to. So, you know, it's helpful to already be able to talk to the physician and know what you have to, and getting permission, assuming the person can still give permission. But with permission, you want to go in and make sure that the questions are answered, you have an appointment, and even sometimes saying, can I have an outside or a separate appointment? Physicians are now, they can actually bill for a caregiver visit. So that's a new billing that came in 2 years ago. So it's now they can get paid, they'll actually do it. So know that that's a billing code, and they can make an appointment with you and actually get paid, and so you can actually have a little longer than that 10 minutes. 7, and you know, we hear this, and this is across the board, we know, exercise. Doesn't mean you have to go out and, bodybuild and do something, but you want something that helps you sleep better, reduces tension, helps build up a reserve so that you have that reserve of energy, so you want to do a little exercise. And so it has just so many benefits, endurance, balance, strength, and as you're doing the exercises, even the person you're caring for, you can do them together, so you can look for exercises that you can do together. Because overall, if you don't begin to take care of yourself, caregiving, through all of the research, really has a lot of negative consequences for your health, not just the person you're caring for. So these are all things that have been found in various multiple research studies that happen to caregivers besides their eating. They don't exercise, they become sleep deprived, more chronic illnesses, quality of life, and increased risk for substance abuse. So this constellation of negative things that can happen are because we don't focus on ourselves when we're the good daughter and the good son and the good grandchild. So, and all of that together, all of this stuff together is what we call stress. And, so it's that physiological, biological reaction to any kind of stimulus. The reason it turns into this long-term stress is because the stress that's in your mind, our body doesn't know the difference between a tiger that really walks in this room right now and an imaginary tiger that if you really imagine a tiger walking in, your body's going to have the same reaction, the same stress response. And so when we get stressed and we worry about something over and over, it still creates the same physiological stress response that's good to help us do fight or flight. But if we let it keep going, it begins to break down our organs and cause blood pressure problems and stuff. And again, our mind doesn't know the difference between the imaginary stress, the ones that we were talking about in our brain and we talk to ourselves about, and things that happen very acutely that we need that extra good stress energy for. I already said that it's very personal and that it can exacerbate other problems. And most people, you don't really always know how much stress you really have been exposed to. So it really, our brains are very powerful. And that's our perceptions. That's how we interpret what is around us. And so if you can look at a situation, for example, if a relative comes in and they put their socks on their hands, you can react of, don't go on your feet. Or you can look at it and go, look at that, those like little funny mittens. One will give you a very different response than the other, but it's how you choose to respond to a particular situation. So how we respond will change our overall stress level, help us cope. And so we want to be able to use things like humor and rethinking and calming methods and talking, and we'll go through each of those now, to manage stress. So just for you to think about right now, think about maybe 5 things that cause you stress. Just, you don't have to share it, just kind of think about it. And think how those kind of things on your list impact you. When you think about these 5, or 2 or 3, how does that impact you? Do you think it's something that you could control or react to differently? And that's what you have to do each time you're faced with any of your little stress responses. Try to figure out, what's my perception? Is this something I can, in some way, change my focus so that it's a little less stressful on me, so that I can manage it? And am I learning to, is it because I haven't set limits? Because maybe I don't say no enough around something, or I'm taking on too many responsibilities, or I have to be a perfectionist about something. Sometimes we have to give up. I need to have the dishes washed every day, or my relative has to change. They have to have a different outfit every day. But if they like a particular shirt and they want to wear that shirt, buy 5 of the same shirts. You had to do it with the kids. I know I had to give several of the same teddy bears. You know, while one's washing, she didn't know. It's the same thing if they have somebody has dementia and that they really want that outfit, and it stresses you that they can't wear the same one. Buy 5 of them, and use, you know, be creative. So, we already talked about this one. You can go to the next one. The other reason that we're seeing a change in how the sandwich generation is working is that family structure has changed from when a lot of the laws and responsibilities were originally decided. We have a different family structure than the 1940s and 50s. We used to have a larger base of younger people caring for a smaller base of older adults. But now, instead of this triangle, we're now getting more of a box because there are more single families, broken families, and so you only have, it's actually going to be three children to 1 adult, where before it used to be an average of 6. So it's going to go down by half. And that's really put different pressures on families. Also, we see women have entered more in the workforce over the years, and that's changed the family structure. And of course, how families, who's going to care for ex-in-laws and different half-siblings, and all of those things have really changed the family structure. And so our emotional and financial support systems have changed over the years. And so you have many smaller families, nuclear families have actually gotten smaller. Overall, the other thing I want to just remind people of is these are, if you start to feel any of these symptoms, those are good kind of signs that maybe you're feeling stressed or moving into depression or an anxiety disorder, and you may want to seek more than just a friend, but maybe look for professional assistance and help with counseling or going to a support group over time. So I'm going to kind of summarize what I've been talking about, because I know we're getting close to time and I want to give us more time for discussion. One thing as caregivers, I would say, is get involved. Advocate, know that you're a caregiver. If you as family members, as daughters and sons and grandparents and aunts and uncles and siblings, if you don't begin to identify as a group under this larger umbrella of caregivers, it's harder for you to get services for yourself as a caregiver. So I would say start advocacy, and as this quote says, never believe that a few caring people can't change the world, for indeed that's all we'll ever have. So advocacy for yourself becomes important. Now the word caregiver has started to trickle into more social services, but if you call and say, I'm a daughter and I'm looking for some kind of help, they don't know. But if you say, I'm a caregiver, then they go, oh, that's our caregiving program, and we can now help you. Then you can say you're the daughter or your son or this. But so labels actually help for finding services. And number 2, so that's kind of part of that is letting you get a reward for being a caregiver, is that you can begin to tell service providers, you can tell politicians the rewards of caregiving. You can let them know about your giving back, the love, the respect, you're renewing a relationship, but it does come with stresses and it does come with needs. And so part of that is you're being pushed in the middle, and the middle class financially, there are no services for you that aren't usually coming out of pocket at this point. Doesn't mean that that can't change. Number 2, what I've been kind of telling you is you have to get engaged. You have to really engage family and friends and pastors and the local pharmacists. All of these become your support system and the people that you can ask for help from. You can take a class. There actually are caregiver classes out there that help you from beginning to end, like in the early stages, or how to communicate classes. And these are just a few of them that are available, powerful tools for caregivers. There's a stress busting program for family caregivers, and we have the Caregivers Are Learning More series of education things. So, and those are just a sampling. There are classes, all kinds of classes and information that you can find. at different places on the internet, but of course I'm going to give you my website too, where we try to gather all of this for you. Recognize that beliefs aren't facts. So sometimes we may have thoughts about, I can't do this anymore, I'm the worst daughter in the world, all of these things. Those, just because you say this to yourself, that's not a fact. We all get overwhelmed. We all at some point can be short-tempered. So don't take that in as this is who you are permanently. Just because at some point you may feel frustrated, that doesn't make you any less of a good, loving daughter, son, sibling, caregiver. So that's what I say, recognize, so that's not beliefs are fact. Anybody have any idea what the clues are so far? No? Huh? Okay, you're getting letters, okay.
Get real.
Get real? Okay, that's close. You're getting close. You got one word. Go ahead. No, so if you say these to yourself, no one else can take care of the loved one like I do. I don't trust strangers. If I do it right, I'll get the love, attention, respect. I'm responsible for my loved ones. All of these are statements that probably are going to box you in, are going to limit how much you do as a caregiver and eventually will exhaust you. So these are beliefs, but those aren't the facts. You can get somebody to come in or help you, or another relative to maybe watch the person you're caring for an hour or two. They're not going to do it the way you do it. But if they can keep them alive for 2 hours, and you can go watch a movie, I would say that's okay. That's what we want. Okay. So, and accepting our emotions, because emotions are just a very normal response to a situation. We feel loving, we feel anger, we feel frustration. All of those are really, if you feel nothing, then you probably aren't involved. But, so it's okay to have emotions. We may not act on everything, but it's all right. These things can just go through our heads. So we want to make sure that we understand what's in a situation. And I put that quote up there, but it's just so you can see that it's something that we learn even from our negative emotions. We do learn patience and love, and all of those things come out of our emotional life. Next message. Our emotions also are a key to teaching us something. So when you feel frustrated, that might be the sign that it's trying to tell you, guess what? You need a little more help. Or maybe you need to try a different solution. So our emotions are messages that we have to listen to because they're there for a reason. They're a tool. And we can learn from them so that we can learn to take appropriate actions around our emotions. When you find that you can't enjoy an activity because your pain overshadows all the pleasure, then that might be the time when you really need to seek help. So our emotions are even telling us when we have lost all of our emotions, and we're just kind of like, oh, nothing matters, this. That means that you need even more help, because that's not normal. We generally can find pleasure in something that we want to do. Our emotions allow us also to make changes. We have to go through grieving and loss, and sometimes we forget that if you're caring for someone with dementia, we are actually experiencing our losses earlier than just the actual death process, because we're losing the identity of the person as they slip away. We remember them, but they don't remember us as much, and so that relationship, we are grieving that loss of the relationship, and if it's a spouse, you're grieving the what-ifs and what you had planned and all of those kind of things. So we have this kind of anticipatory grief that is already going through our lives, but sometimes we don't identify it as grief. We don't realize that we're grieving now, because we always think of grief as something that has to be terminal, but we're actually having a longer process of grief. And recognizing that can also help you get through these times a little more. And that can be why we might be stressed, because we're holding back on we don't want to recognize it next. So part of, the other part in doing things is this little engine. You haven't even heard the story of the little engine. I think I can, I think I can, I know I can. And setting that attitude, starting knowing that we can just step by step, you're going to get up that hill, you'll be able to do it. And part of that is how we talk to ourselves. Anybody already know what the answer is? Get what? Somebody said it right. Get respite. That's the answer. That's number 10. Okay, so stress reduction, we talked about that. Next. Practice positive self-talk. So sometimes it's just reminding yourself that you're doing the best you can do with the information you have right now. We learned this with children. You can learn this, you can use that same message over and over. We don't always have all the information, but you're doing the best you can and reminding yourself of that. Next. So information is power. Next. And so if we learn about the disease, you learn the resources, and you learn about understanding how you can handle long-term care financing. You don't want to isolate yourself, because social isolation really, both for you and the person you're caring for, is very bad. In England, they did research. They now have a minister of loneliness, because they found that social isolation and loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 1 pack of cigarettes a day. It has the same physiological effects. So you as a caregiver, or as a caring family, you don't want to separate yourself and become a lonely, isolated family. It's not healthy. Technology, and when I say technology can help, it's not just going on the internet. I use technology in the larger sense of learning adaptation. So if you're caring for someone with dementia, sometimes what's the best clothing? Velcro can work. What can you do to change things in your home so that maybe if you're concerned the person's going to wander out the door, what can you get? You know, can you get some tiles, and can you add things that are tracking systems? So I don't just mean technology in that sense, but I mean overall adaptations that make it easier for you and for the person to modify what they can do and keep their strength up. There are a lot of things that are really helpful out there. So learning and using technology to find information, but also using all those adaptations is important. So, and then finally, change is just gonna, you have to expect change. You have to keep in your mind that as you go through this process, it's a journey. And you're going to at times feel like, I am lost, I have no idea, I'm sitting in a forest, but you're going to find a path out, and then you'll find new ways of coping. So what happens is each time you're along this journey, you kind of get lost and you come something new, you're going to have what I call the new normal. And that's where we have to reset ourselves. If we keep trying to go back and saying, I want it back to normal, you're going to stay stuck and feel frustrated. But if you let yourself kind of go along with change, understand where you are, and then adapt to the new normal, then you probably, that stress will kind of lift. You'll be able to cope better each time, and know that as caregivers, it's a long journey, and you're going to be there for a while. So overall, we learn to accept, you know that you're not alone. Sometimes being a caregiver, it's really tough, and it really stinks. And that's okay. You know, and it's rough. But know that you're not alone, and that there are lots of resources out there. And one of which is respite. And part of that is taking a break. Respite means take a break. And it's taking a break to do something that you want to do, not have to do. So it's not saying, oh, I'm going to take a break so that I can go do all of the laundry really fast. And it's probably not something you really want to do. But taking a break, saying, I'm going to have somebody come over so that I can read a book uninterrupted. Or so I can go take a shower. Now you want to take a shower, but an uninterrupted shower feels very different. Being able to go and have a meal without worry. Walking your dog without worry. Doing some yoga. Going to a movie. Sleeping uninterrupted. There are a lot of things that you can put down for respite, and in the back, I have tips for caregivers. If you can't think of how to relax, there's a little booklet back there that gives you some tips on what is respite. And so respite really is an important thing to do. So thank you to those of you who caught the clues on Get Respite. Sorry I don't have any gifts, but you guys you're really caregiver strong. Our program is called the LA Caregiver Resource Center. You can call us, and one of the things besides calling, we usually start with phone calls, but now you can also go online and reach our program first online, which is our LA Caregiver Care Journey Support, and you register online. You can begin the process to answer some questions, and it opens a portal, which is an individualized portal. You have to have your own password, and you'll get individualized information and resources based on your answers to questions that we ask you about your personal caregiving situation. From there, you'll also get a family consultant who will call you after looking over your health, the record that you start there, and then you'll begin to have somebody who will be with you throughout your care journey. And so you'll have a social worker, you'll have an online portal that you can store all of your records in, all of your information. And in that portal, we have a learning center that has some of the classes that I mentioned. It'll have a calendar of events. You'll be able to, just keep all of your information. Plus, you can have a confidential way of reaching your family consultant. So we call that our Care Journey program. There's a little card back there that has the website. Next slide. But as long as you go, if you call our center, or you can start on the website first, and then the follow-up call will be given to you, and that will give you a lot of the basic information. And then you can join and have services. Now, you ask, are we funded? We're funded by doing lectures like this. We are funded through your tax dollars, so I'm your tax dollars at work, state of California, and through the county, through federal funds for family caregiving programs. So that's how we're funded, and of course donations. But use your funds. We are one of the few programs that we don't ask for income level or anything, and everybody's open to use the services. So I'm your tax dollars at work. The center is your tax dollars at work. Put us to work. So I think that's it. Yeah, that's what if you go on our website, that's kind of what you'll see. And thank you. And now, questions. Thoughts? I talk too much? No questions. Okay.
Do you, my mother's quite elderly. She's 91 and living by herself. And my sister suggested if one of us could have on our health insurance a GCM, a geriatric care manager.
Care manager.
Is that, do you know of that being available to, how to be, obtain the services of one?
I don't know that usually, I think what you might be saying is maybe look for a geriatrician under your, but it's not going to be under your health plan. It would have to be under your mother's health plan. So depending on her health insurance, they might have a geriatric physician who then might be working with a geriatric care manager that they would refer you to. Some of those are usually paid out-of-pocket services. You can get the same services from us.
Okay.
So depending on where you live. Now, our program is Los Angeles based, but we're part of a statewide California program. So there's a Caregiver Resource Center anywhere in California. So, but if you're the caregiver in this case, you would qualify under LA. And then there's nationwide. There are now caregiver programs like the one in California through the area agencies on aging. There, if you call and use the word caregiver, and you call the area agencies on aging and ask for their caregiver program, they too have what generally a geriatric case manager would do. So depending on what your mother's income is and things like that, the geriatric case manager might be the one where sometimes for your mother, they would come in and maybe provide, find out if there are home health agencies that can work with her, if she qualifies for Medicaid, if there are legal issues that can help. And then other times they actually do some of the, like go get the medicines, or they find somebody who can help do those kind of things on your behalf. But it's usually for a fee. Yeah. And so that's what a kind of geriatric case manager does. We don't do case management and like direct service case management for your parent, but we help you understand like who to reach out to or give you the referrals for those kind of things. So, but you can make an assessment, and they'll come out and do an assessment to see, maybe look around the house to see if there's other options, if you want to look for different housing options, all kinds of things like that through the assessment. So it's a good idea, but it's not going to be on your insurance. Usually that does not come out, it would be under your mother's insurance. Other questions, comments? Well, there's